Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Stephen Poplin. I've known Stephen since the 1970s, and we're very happy that he has come back home to Virginia Beach, at least for the time being. Stephen is an amazing astrologer. He's a philosopher. He does tarot. He does a variety of a lot of interesting things. He has degrees in philosophy and humanities, which I'm sure when he got out of school had all kinds of job offers for that major. Anyway, I took a workshop with Stephen, I think it was about a year ago, where he talked about the history of music and as it relates to astrology, is my recollection. I was really impressed. I mean, I'd heard him many times in lectures, but the next day it was service here, Sunday service, and I came in and said, "Do you realize how brilliant you are?" And I'm sure because he is intelligent, he realizes that. But I have determined that he should be, I'm going to partner with him to do trivia games, and we're going to win all the prizes. Open your hearts and to experience Stephen Poplin, all his inspiration and love.
Thank you, Judy. That was too kind. Okay, yes. 2020, October. It is the fall. I could say it is autumn, but the fall sounds like a little better term for the year 2020. Not to scare you, but Halloween started several months ago. Thus, my celebratory shirt. I am a hypnotherapist, and I will be giving suggestions. Okay, now, some of you are doing this. It's okay, it's okay. These are going to be good suggestions. You're going to be fine with them. You'll be happy with them. We need to breathe. Now, who is against that? Yes, our bodies need oxygen. Breathe. It feels good. It's recharging. And bring that now to your posture. Feel that breath going in, aligned, and that does feel good. The prana of life, energy, breathing, oxygen. And so, perhaps later on, what will you do when I use the word oxygen? That's good. Yeah, you'll thank me later. For about 15 years, I did these stage hypnosis shows. My intent was to entertain, but also to show what could happen in a relatively short time when people were given specific suggestions, and then they would conform, or they would do all sorts of really fun sorts of things. But the idea was partly to entertain, but it was also to demonstrate how quickly we can have these impressions placed into our consciousness, and then people would follow suit. And if that can happen in a short time during a 1 hour show, then think about what goes on also in life as you go along your way, as you're watching television, as you're listening to advertisements and so forth. Well, anyway, I had what was called the copycat routine. And how that would go is that I would choose, of course I'd have a bunch of people up on the stage, and I would have 4 people in a row, and I would choose one of them to be the trend setter, to be the leader. And then periodically, then I would give some suggestions to this trendsetter. And it could be something like, Okay, it's so good to raise your hand. It's like, I need to stretch. Oh, feel free to cross your leg. And then within a minute or two, you'll notice that all 4 of them were doing the very same pose. It was very funny. And then periodically, I would say, oh, it feels so good to be unit, to have that unified sense. It's like a cadre, to be like fitting in. Isn't that right? Doesn't it feel good? You know, and then they'll all say, yeah, you know, all 4 of them in a row. And so then I would go along and talk about other things in the hypnosis show. And then I would look over there at my copycats, and all 4 of them were, you know, left leg resting over the right leg, just in the same pose. And then I said, oh yeah, yes, that conformity thing and that feeling of fitting in, of being with it, of being perhaps with part of the in crowd. And that goes back to our school days. Many of us recognize that. It does work, and there then is that reinforcement. By the way, sociologists refer to groups that adopt another's ideology as carrier groups. Interesting wording, huh? So my hypnosis shows worked really well in a safe environment. There was 2 times in high schools, 1 time in a business situation in which it wasn't safe. The people didn't feel safe. And the students kind of slinked off the stage. And it was rather a difficult situation to observe. There were cat calls, it was some name calling, there was people trying to make fun of them on stage. And so then they did not feel good. And so then they just kind of quietly walked off the stage. And so here they were, feeling self-conscious, feeling embarrassed, and it kind of shut these kids down. And then, of course, it shut down the show. Now, to be self-conscious is actually a very good thing. But then to be self-conscious in that sense of having this finger pointing at you or having all of your classmates pointing at you, that just kind of withered the students, and it polluted them with their doubt, with this self-judgment, and it was really quite a difficult thing to experience. But again, every single experience in whether they be these shows or the different countries that I've been into, always like, well, that was unpleasant, but that's a bit of life. I've learned something. There's that also going on in the world. But also the conclusion here is that we collectively need trust. Society needs trust. We need trust and faith. With faith, there is an implied sense that we can rely on things. We can rely on news. We can rely on news sources. We can rely on facts and people, and even representatives in our government. Yes, faith is certainly more than just faith in God or a faith in ultimate justice. We need faith and trust. You probably all know the story of the Emperor's New Clothes. That was a fairy tale written by Hans Christian Andersen in 1837. And it is basically about a vain emperor who got exposed before his subjects. And so what happened was they had 2 swindlers came into town. They noticed this vainglorious emperor who spent lavish amounts of money upon his nice finery and his clothes. And he was so taken up with that he was certainly not taken up with the good of the community or his people. So they were posing as weavers, and they offered to supply him with some magnificent clothes that were invisible to those who were stupid or incompetent. A tale for our time, a tale for all times. We see the conformity in society. Many see the truth of things, but then they look over to their neighbors for acknowledgement. Did you see what I saw? And if they don't really get that, then they kind of like, okay, well, I don't want to seem stupid or incompetent. But I tell you here and right now, see the circus. Call it for what it is. And have the faith of the boy confronting the emperor. Oxygen. I see that. Belief and trust. Don't succumb to the fear. Oh, just a second. My Facebook just beeped. Yeah. Well, around between 2009 and 2012, there was an expansion in the internet of social media. With Facebook and then Twitter and now so many other forms of social media. This is officially, or let's say positively, a place that we can share stories, jokes, pictures, sharing with friends and so forth. We can share and connect with friends far away, long distance. What a fabulous thing. In fact, I've got some friends taking a look at this live feed right now from Europe. Hi. Hallo, alles Gute. However, some recent studies have shown that, coincidentally, anxiety and depression, typically those found with teenage girls, have increased since 2012. Something about that year, 2012. What was it? Maybe the Mayans were right. Anyway, what we have here is this comparison game that is an impossible game to win. You're too tall, you're too thin, you're too much, you're too this, you're too that. It just goes on, and you really are wasting your time. But at the same time, again, statistically, and it's actually turned into a larger sociological problem with, again, teenagers, especially with young girls, that there is indeed more depression and anxiety along with this. Basically, we're being watched and we're being evaluated. Now, as an astrologer, I look for signs, I look for synchronicities. And I believe that the wind, the light, the shadows, and the falling leaves of autumn might have something to say to us. We get these signs. But I have noticed in the last decade that there are other machinations occurring. There are other signs kind of like being pushed in. And this again comes from this social media. Call it focused groups, or maybe bait. Then I'd have to say, beware of Google Analytics. We are being tracked, and then the ads that we supposedly are supposed to be watching then are fed to us by the likes that we have, by the clicks that we make. And so be very careful. I even noticed here recently that when you see this particular video on YouTube, and then there's this list on the right-hand side of other things that if you like this, maybe you like that. But as soon as you click it, not only will you see that particular thing that they suggested for you, but they have just collected a little bit more information. Subliminal manipulation. What we need then is oxygen. Our constant and important jobs as the captains of our own fate, as leaders of our own minds and lives, is to filter out the alternative facts, the unsubstantiated conspiracy theories, and focus upon what is good and real to us, to our friends, that makes us feel good, that builds us up, that gives us that light. And the corporate advertisers, Wall Street, unscrupulous politicians, they're all trying to manipulate and prod. But remember, a child of sincerity and faith can see through this. These emperors are weaving tales of deception for their profit, not for your good graces. So what did we get? What is the result of all of this that's being foisted upon us? We have viruses. There are computer viruses, there are conspiracy viruses, and there's political hot air. What a year. So the world got sick, and the economy got sick, and now we're all sick and tired of it all. We need clean and healthy choices. And what would that clear-sighted young child do and say about that? Perhaps one thing is that things happen in stages. And we've seen several stages here in this interesting year, 2020. And then it brings us to this really interesting concept of the 4 stages of spiritual development. Years ago, probably about 30 years ago, I read M. Scott Peck's book, The Different Drum, Community, Making, and Peace, that was published in 1987. He was also the author of The Road Less Traveled, and also a rather disturbing book called what is it? People of the Lie. Worth reading. You may not like it, but worth reading. Anyway, M. Scott Peck, a psychiatrist and author and an astute observer of society, he talked about and came up with a theory of the 4 stages of spiritual development. And these are actual groups. And sometimes people could perhaps through their lives, they will move from one group to the next, but typically we're talking about societal groups. So the first stage here is called the chaotic antisocial. Now, individuals in this group are pretty much typically egotistical. They may talk about some love and caring, but what they really are interested in is themselves. And so they're only focused upon their own wants and needs, and they can be manipulative and self-serving in acquiring that. They essentially don't have principles strong enough to overcome their own sense of personal desires, and thus they have no integrity. In an effort to move away from this particular group, Peck talks about the second group, which by the way is the largest group, and this is the formal institutional group. They become affiliated with some type of institution that provides security and stability. They are focused then upon rules, and they want those rules to provide them with this sense of stability and certainty. And they may then move within that what appears to be in dogmatic and legalistic ways. And then they would, let's say, fight back or react to those who would change their perceptions or would wish to question their rules and security found in their particular institutions. Peck said that the majority of churchgoers are found in this particular stage. They are likely to perceive God as an external, transcendent being that can be loving and punitive, much like real parents. And Peck points out that stage 2 individuals can be found in every ideology. Individuals in the 3rd stage, according to Peck, is the skeptic individual. And they tend to perceive themselves or identify themselves as non-believers, as atheists, agnostics, or scientifically minded people who would really want to understand why and wherefore. They wish to have a logical explanation for the meaning of life. These people really don't need a sense of an institution telling them what to do because they wish to find out for themselves. They wish to question their own beliefs and the beliefs of others around them. Many in this stage are actively seeking answers to the meaning of life. They also focus upon social justice, and they work for social reform and community projects. Now, that particular group may not like what I'm about to say, because Peck then goes on to the 4th group, and he says that those who continue to seek will move into the final stage, which is called the mystical communal stage. And here, individuals focus upon community rather than individualism. They may include non-specific community or a universal sense. They are fine with mysteries and the unknown, and they believe that there is a universal connection and that very likely all sentient beings matter. They are aware of some of the previous groups and stages, and they are usually non-judgmental about them because they recognize that, everyone has their place. They focus, however, upon unity rather than separateness. They accept the lack of definitive answers, and they look to the mystery of the universe. And as part of the spiritual process, they are willing to live in the unknown and to explore the unknowable. Peck's stages of spiritual development thus move from a chaotic and egocentric stage into more of an organized, secure space of conformity, then into a questioning stage, and then focus finally upon a larger sense of community and unity within the beauty of the universe. Each group is more aware of the groups before it, but not so clear about what's coming next. I find that also interesting. So, where are you? Where are we? One can say, from a perspective of the 4th stage, we can say this: we are children of the universe. Breathe. Let's add a little bit more oxygen here right now. Remember your posture. Tune in, and if you wish, you might wish to close your eyes for this next part. Take this in. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive Him to be, and whatever your labors and aspirations. In the noisy confusion of life, keep peace in your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful. Strive to be happy. That's by Max Ehrmann, Desiderata. I remember when I first came across that, I think back in the 70s, it was like, on some 1627 thing on some church door, but it was actually written in the 1927. Desiderata, a poem for a way of life. That'll bring you more oxygen right there, huh? So yes, we need to breathe, we need to perceive, to weigh the real facts, and to choose. The world is a stage, and we must act. Vote. And so, as you go out there, exercising your free choices, voting and choosing, I offer a final thought by Martin Luther King Jr. Unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. Thank you for listening, and blessings on your day.